When you're prepping miniatures for the WitchBorn game, we recommend round bases over square, and I'll show you why.
A square base is almost an inch across, but at an angle that's almost an inch and a half. Obviously, round bases have a consistent diameter. So why a problem? Measuring from a square, a player may measure from the corner when it's advantageous to him, or from the edge when it's not. Not exactly fair. Players also tend not to measure charges. Instead, they move the miniature a pace or the width of a base. With a square, moving at a diagonal one pace, you move an extra half inch and it doesn't even look like you're cheating. Put a great looking group of miniatures on eBay, but all have square bases. So I'm going to show you how to convert these to round. I have a well-worn snipping tool I purchased at the hardware store. I'm going to make a series of perpendicular cuts. You want to make sure not to snip off a foot or important detail. Flex the base to see if you can break the super glue's bond. And she's a tough one. Some just pop right out. This one hung in there though. There. She's free and unharmed. Let's put round bases on these. I like gel super glue the best. It's just easier to control. Let's slot that guy right in. His feet have a little paint missing, but I'm going to add ballast and add grass to cover that later. I sit him off to the side on this silly 2x4. I found that the beat up, uneven surface makes it less likely for him to stick if any glue slops over. I'll slide him to a new spot after 5 minutes. Repeat this for each miniature and be sure to get the soles of the feet. Do them all at once to save time. These look great already. Let's let them sit and dry.
The miniatures from yesterday are dry and ready to go, but I want to see if I can give them a little more finished look.
Next, I get out a little pile of aquarium rocks. That eBay order was much bigger than I let on. We got all these and more for 60 bucks. Use liberal drops of Elmer's glue. The aquarium rocks become big terrain pieces. I add rocks with no rhyme or reason. I tend to put 0 to 5 rocks on each base. Generally, an odd number looks best. Maybe just 1 here. Here's the whole batch waiting patiently to dry. The glue dries clear and smooth. That's why you can glob it on. I'm going to get out some Milliput. Use any modeling putty you like. I always seem to cut too much. This putty comes in 2 sticks that get mixed. I want to cut off equal pieces. I dampen my fingers just a little bit before mixing so it's easier to wash off later. Knead it together good. I have way too much here, but I'm going to roll out a little sausage. Most miniatures slot in without completely filling the gap on the base. Fill the gaps with your putty so they don't show up later. Trim the excess to save and reuse. Then we'll patch the other side. Bases will be painted, so don't worry if this looks ugly right now, because it does. Not much to see here, but we do have Milliput in all the cracks. Nothing to do now, but let them dry.
That putty's going to dry after 2 to 3 hours, and now we're ready to move on to the sloppiest step.
I've mixed some fine and coarse ballast. It's what railroad modelers use. Woodland Scenic sells this along with watered down glue, or you can make your own. People are going to get upset, but this is a very old sable brush that has come to a horrible fate. Let's load the sable brush with the watered down glue and puddle it on top of the base. This dries clear and matte, so don't panic if you get it on the miniature's feet. Add pinches of ballast on top. Then load the brush with glue. It almost becomes an eyedropper. Be careful not to touch the ballast. Just let the glue drip onto it. Drip that in until it gets milky. I'm going to dry off his base, and you can see the texture that I've built up. Now I'll hit the backside. That will dry overnight. I'll wipe the excess off the edges, then we'll have a great rocky look. Let's do one more that has a little more going on. Try and keep the glue and ballast off the aquarium rocks to leave them exposed. The ballast makes a great texture for dry brushing. This paper is doubled up so this mess won't drip through and ruin my table underneath. Clean his edges and you're on your way. This first batch has texture that will show up even better when painted. So here's the mess the following day. Shake this guy and nothing falls off. This guy's stuck a little, and a couple stones fell off, but all in all, very solid. Let's save the leftover ballast, and I'll reuse this paper too. Now for the fun part, let's paint. I'll squeeze out a healthy amount of burnt umber. I use a lot, so it's cheapest to buy a tube of Liquitex heavy body acrylic paint. This is an old brush that I can still get a point on. And for detail, I've got a little finer brush, but you don't want to get too fine of a brush, otherwise you're going to spend all day painting this. For this coat, I never dip a dry brush into the paint. Make sure it's just a little dampened. Go a little thicker to cover the aquarium rocks. This is one step you can really lay on the paint. Then with a thinner brush, I can hit a couple spots that were missed. Here's the burnt umber on the first dozen. Normally I paint with subtler variations in tone, but this is going to show up better on the video. I start by dry brushing with light brown. It's a little more orangey than I would like, but not for long. A little yellow ochre tones down the orange. Lightly dry brush over the raised areas so you don't obliterate what you built up during the last two coats. Normally I paint with a light source coming from left to right. I'm doing this to build up definite highlight and shadow sides on the rocks. Time for the spell singer. We've already got a bunch of colors going on here that are going to give us very interesting textured terrain. Pretty good. Beige is the brightest highlight, so we're just going to tickle that in a few places. Let's do the backside. I'll get a big highlight on top of that aquarium rock. He's done. You should be able to knock out a batch fairly quickly. My elves are looking pretty sharp. I got out a number 4 flat brush. That's going to give me the size I need to fix the edges of these bases. If there are fingerprints, glue, or slopped over paint, this is my chance to clean up my mistakes. Personally, I prefer black edges because it seems to frame the miniature nicely, but you can make your bases any color. Work quickly as you rotate the miniature. Obviously, I don't worry about painting the paper. The paper's going to be a mess by the end. You just want to avoid messing up the rocks that you painted so beautifully. With the bases painted, it's time to add a little grass like I've done here. On the elves, I'm using this bright green. I use tweezers to grab a chunk that I like. Try it, see how it looks, and if it's too big, break off a little bit. I just put a dab of Elmer's on the tuft and press it in with the tweezers. It'll take a couple hours to dry, and that little blob of white glue will completely disappear. I'll add a little tuft in back. That's nice. Let's call her done. We'll do another guy here. Smaller clumps are better than bigger ones. You can usually break the big ones apart. Railroad modelers use this stuff too. There's a huge variety at sceneryexpress.com. I've seen other brands on websites that sell minis, but you get a lot less for your money. Move to the front, hit that with some glue. Nice. Basing isn't about having any great painting skill. It's just having the right tools and systematically working through each step. With very little effort, these look fantastic. These miniatures are dry, so I'm going to paint some numbers. Pick the brush that you want to use by deciding how bold you want the numbers. Each stroke should have just one pass. For example, when I paint this 1, it's just one stroke, not several passes that I go over again and again. It's nice to start with your leader first because a number 1 is just one thin stripe, right? I use this plastic cup to steady myself. And I put out 1 on the front and the back. 2s are a lot more complicated, but I had good teachers in grammar school. There's a 2. I suck at fine detail, but at arm's length, even my number 3 isn't too bad. There's the whole group converted from square to round bases. So all these miniatures have had their bases converted from square to round. Obviously, you can use these techniques on any miniatures that you have. I've got 3 full war clans here at least. Anyone want to play Asylum?
For the WitchBorn, death is only the beginning.